ask you your title. What does AG stand for? Acting. Okay. Okay. So acting director at the climate change unit of the Environmental Protection Agency of Ghana.
Yeah,
Perfect. Thank you so much. Oh, wait, wait, wait.スタートの Q をいただけますと、スタートの Q をいただけますと、
もういいんじゃないですか、ね、いないと思います。
じゃあ飛ばしますね。
そうです。なんか一言噂したらパッと言えばいいのかな。じゃあやっぱりアナウンスで全員前にいますかって一回アナウンスした方がいいと思います。
はい。Could we
だけ人確認して。
スピーカーですかね。Okay, so we would just like to ask if all the speakers are here in the front row and the panelists. I think we have all our panelists. Do we have all panelists? Sandra, do we have all panelists? Yes? So we're just missing one. No, yeah. So we're just missing one speaker. right, everyone. I am so sorry. We're so sorry for the delay, but we are now ready to start the event. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining our side event, sharing best practices and lessons learned from capacity building for implementation of Article 6. I'm going to be the overall facilitator of today's event. My name is Risa Kikuchi from Global Environment Center Foundation. We're pleased to co-organize this event with the Ministry of the Environment of Japan, Climate Focus, Global Public Policy Institute, and Gold Standard. Through this event, we would like to share experiences of some of the capacity building activities for implementation of Article 6, including institutional arrangement for authorization, registry, and reporting. In session 1, our guest speakers will share the status of Article 6 capacity building. In session 2, we invite speakers from different backgrounds to share their good practices of capacity building related activities. And in session 3, we have a panel discussion that will be moderated by Climate Focus on effective implementation of Article 6 moving forward. I first would like to welcome Mr. Hiroshi Ono, Vice Minister for Global Environmental Affairs of the Ministry of the Environment of Japan, on this stage to deliver the opening remarks. Mr. Ono?
Dear participants from all over the world, good afternoon. Let me express my deepest gratitude for your participation in this event on capacity building for Article 6 implementation. I would also like to express my appreciation to the co-organizers, namely the Climate Focus, the Global Environment Center Foundation, the Global Public Policy Institute, and the Gold Standards Foundation for their support in organizing this event. It is no doubt that market mechanisms under the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement will play a significant role in achieving the 1.5-degree target. Experts have estimated that the implementation of Article 6 could lead to a reduction of up to 9 billion tons of additional CO2 emissions per year by 2030, which represent approximately 30% of the recent global CO2 emissions. The importance of Article 6 and the capacity building needs for its implementation have been well recognized in this year's G7 and G20. It is globally recognized that market mechanisms are important tools to scale up mitigation ambition while fostering climate business and attracting green investment. Following on the adoption of the Article 6 rulebook at COP26, the Ministry of the Environment Japan virtually held international conferences in February and March of this year to discuss institutional arrangement and capacity building for the implementation of Article 6 with relevant government officials and stakeholders. The two conferences attracted more than 1,000 participants from 120 countries. This September, Japan further held a preparatory meeting for the Article 6 implementation partnership in Kamakura, Japan. At this meeting, 3 specific capacity building needs were identified. First, promotion of necessary understanding to participate in the Article 6 implementation. Second, procedures on the corresponding adjustment, authorization, reporting, and so on. Third, concrete project formulation for emission reductions under Article 6. Today, we will invite countries and organizations working on capacity building for Article 6 implementation to share the current status of their activities and future challenges facing us. We will then discuss the way forward to the effective implementation of Article 6 by inviting both providers and beneficiaries of capacity building support. Lastly, let me make one announcement. Tomorrow at the Japan Pavilion, we will be launching the Article 6 implementation partnership in cooperation with the UNFCCC Secretariat and the World Bank, among others. This partnership will contribute to building the capacity of developing countries to implement market mechanisms and created high-integrity carbon market. I sincerely hope that all the know-how shared between the participants in this event will support the early and steady implementation of Article 6 in the entire world. Thank you very much for your attention and participation.
Thank you very much, Vice Minister Ono. Now, let us begin session 1, entitled Status of Article 6 Capacity Building. Just to let you know, due to time constraints, there's no Q&A session for session 1 and 2. As our first guest speaker is unfortunately not here from UNFCCC Secretariat, we would like to have our next speaker, Ms. Maiko Uga from the Ministry of the Environment of Japan. She's Section Chief in the Office of Director for International Cooperation for Transition to Decarbonization and Sustainable Infrastructure. You have the floor.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for coming to this event, and also thank you so much for all the panelists. And this is a very exciting event after the Article 6 guidance was adopted last COP. And today I would like to focus on what we have been doing after the COP26. Okay. Next slide, please. So this slide just shows the number of countries interested in Article 6. So with a good design, we have a potential to raise our ambition, and about out of 165 countries, 74% of countries are interested in using the Article 6. And within the number, about more than 50% are interested in 6.2, and 34% are interested in 6.4. And next slide, please. So after the COP26, we organized two series of international conference on Article 6. We invited high-level speakers, and they addressed their strong support for the Article 6 implementation. And we found some of the key findings, so we have now guidances, but we need a strong coordination among all the stakeholders, including the parties, multilateral organization, and all the private sectors. And there are also comments from the country that they need they need a coordination mechanism so that they can share the experiences about the authorization and how to set up the institutional arrangement in their countries. Although I think there are not many countries that can ready to show their institutional arrangement. And also there are some comment that capacity building is good, but we need piloting and also support for the registry is very important to actually implement Article 6. And so CDM era, we created many tools, but Article 6 is different, and so we need a new tool that are consistent with Article 6 guidances. And we have been doing a lot of capacity building and many organizations involved, but to implement Article 6 swiftly, we need to scale up the capacity building activities for all the stakeholders. Next slide, please. So government of Japan, after COP26, we also organized a preparatory meeting for the Article 6 implementation partnership. This partnership just announced, but tomorrow we have a launching event, and everyone is welcomed, and we have high-level speakers from various countries. But we invited many parties and organizations to talk about current status of the capacity building activity they are planning or already implementing. And result, we got a similar result from the international conference prior to this preparatory meeting, but we concluded that we need more capacity building activities to really go into the implementation stage of the Article 6. Next slide, please. So this is just the information that G7 and G20 outcome also refer to the Article 6 capacity building. So there are many venues that emphasizing that this need for the scaling up the capacity building for Article 6. Next slide, please. So after the COP, we did some survey with partner countries and organizations, what kind of activities they are planning or conducting, and we got many feedbacks. And this is just like a picture of their activity, but we have many representatives from those organizations, and they can talk about those more detail in our panel discussion. So next slide, please. Okay, so this is just a timeline of the Article 6 implementation. We are 2020 now. 2020, and seems 2030 is a little far, but we really need to accelerate our action in this urgency in climate change. And so, but yes, this put a thing that we need to tackle to implement Article 6, and yes, authorization, setting up the registry, and after that, we have several reporting requirements, and these all need to be understood by everybody in this community of Article 6. And next slide, please. So this is my last slide, but related to the Article 6 implementation partnership that will be launched tomorrow lunchtime. And so basically it was based on the survey and communication with parties and organizations. We came up this global partnership to facilitate the capacity building for all the stakeholders interested in the Article 6. And so countries and area of work and regional cooperation, we try to accommodate as many activities as possible but this is a collaborative work, and hopefully, if you are from organization or private sector, just let us know that if you are willing to participate or contribute to this partnership in some way. Okay, thank you, and that's all from me.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Uga. And I hope we invite you to all attend the event tomorrow too. Let us start session 2 now, entitled Sharing Good Practices of Article 6 Capacity Building. For this session, our first guest speaker is Dr. Daniel Benefor, Acting Director at the Climate Change Unit of the Environmental Protection Agency of Ghana. You have the floor, Dr. Benefor. Okay.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I do not have a speech or a slides, but I want to share with you our journey so far. And first of all, I wanted to indicate about 5 points, then I will bring my talk to an end. The first point I wanted to share with you is that capacity building is a foundation for effective participation of the Article 6 mechanisms. And we in Ghana had lived to realize that having to work with an independent institution that provides hand-holding support is a very important piece of the work to be able to participate in the Article 6. And one example is the work that we are doing with the UNDP. The UNDP had been a very important organic partner in brokering engagement with very important key stakeholders in the government and outside the government. On the back of our cooperation with the UNDP, we have been able to do an assessment of the capacity needs for Ghana to be able to engage with the Article 6 framework. And we relied on the existing World Bank tools for the assessment of the capacities that we have in the country. And it covered both the policy, the institutional, the regulatory, and the opportunities in the country to be able to engage in this process. The other very important point I want to highlight is also the need for effective coordination of the ministries and agencies and private sector and even the commercial banks in the country to be able to even start to create a cooperative approach. It takes an average of 8 to 1 year, 12 months to complete the negotiations of a cooperative approach. And it is the collaboration among the environment and the other ministries that work together to be able to develop this cooperative approach. And one lesson that we have learned in the country is the need to have that coordination among the various ministries. But this coordination works effectively when you have a focal ministry, a fulcrum, or a team that is dedicated to deliver this. The third point is the undeniable role of the private sector. And that it is not enough to create national frameworks or come up with bilateral agreements. It is also important to equally get the involvement of the local banks and the private sector that would really take advantage of the frameworks that you would have developed. And therefore, reaching out to the private sector as soon as possible is very critical for us. And the other point I wanted to highlight is also the fact that it is important to realize that in engaging in Article 6.2 cooperative approaches or all the rest, it is important to also take note of the fact that the non-state actors, particularly the role of the CSOs, is very important. So in Ghana, we have set up an institutional arrangement that has a three-tier structure. The first structure is the bottom structure, which is a body that we have set up on the back of the existing CDM DNA arrangement that would deliver the administrative functions of the mechanisms as well as the Article 6.2 cooperative approach. This body has been given a formal mandate to engage with the actors in the market. The other level of the institutional arrangement really is a multi-sectorial carbon market committee. And this committee is mandated to implement the laid-down procedures for authorization under Article 6.2 and 6.4, and in particular, approvals also under 6.4. And this committee is made up of both government, private sector, and CSOs, and even businesses who are supposed to work together to implement this mechanism. On top of that, the higher tier is an interministerial body. That body is supposed to simply provide an oversight and direction in the engagement of the country and ensure that the Article 6 mechanisms help Ghana to attain its NDC objectives and also its long-term low-emission objectives. So to us, one very important lesson that we have learned is the importance of bringing everybody on board and bring them on board as early as possible and maintain or keep them on the table. That for us is one of the most important success factors. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Benefort. We would like to have our next guest speaker, Ms. Temula Murin. She's a policy researcher in the climate and energy area of the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies. Your presentation's right here. Yes, yes. Oh, sorry. Right here. Okay. Do you want me to?
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Timoling, and I work in IGS. Today, I'm going to share. Our experience from mutual learning program for enhanced transparency for capacity building activity for Article 6.2 reporting. And for today, I also would like to thank organizer for inviting us to present our activity. So for mutual learning program, the purpose is to understand how to apply the reporting guidance under Article 6.2 and 13, and also to explore improvement areas of next reporting for the countries. And last but not least, to strengthen a network working on Article 6 and 13 reporting countries and organizations. The activity is 6 months long. It's pretty long, and it requires that kind of commitment and contribution from the partner countries. And we have 3 meetings and 2 reporting exercises. And we produce the draft reporting on Article 6 and 13 that country can use for their national reporting if that is possible. And as you can see, the participant and the topics, and we have been doing this program since 2020, and we have pairs with Thailand, Chile, Indonesia, Mongolia, and Bangladesh for working Article 6.2 reporting. So here you can see the overview of the schedule. We have a kickoff meeting, and then we discuss the first exercise. The first exercise, which is to draft Article 6.2 reporting using joint crediting mechanism as an example. And then we also review each other's report and then ask questions to each other's deliverables. And we will have, the main meeting. And for that, we present our deliverables, and we decide what could be the second exercise. And usually for the second exercise, we do refinement of the deliverables from first exercise, and also we share the answers. And lastly, we have follow-up meetings to discuss the review of the program and also next step for each countries. So here I briefly explain the key discussion points and the lesson learned. And the key discussion point from our program is understanding terminologies for Article 6 reporting, specifically for the GCM, because we are using the GCM as example. And then second, sharing information on how to establish institutional arrangement for authorization, because this is very new for partner countries. So it's also good to have what could be the arrangement for authorization, and also deepening the understanding of the corresponding adjustment. And key lesson is that, as I explained, the mutual learning program is 7 months long, so it requires strong and long-term commitments from partner countries. And we also noticed that there is a lack of basic understanding of Article 6 reporting. For example, ITMOS. What is ITMOS? And third point is practical experience is helpful to understand this Article 6 guidance and also identify gaps in the countries. And we also learned that flexibility is very important for the countries. And for example, the program schedule and exercise topics, and then for the mutual learning program, this is an informal program, so it's very free, open to have discussion. And we also noticed that the learning by doing, and then value in the process of the learning, not the result of the reporting. So this is, I think, my last slide. Thank you very much for your attention, and feel free to go to our website to look for further information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Murren. Now we would like to have our last guest speaker for this session, Mr. Stephen Kansuk. He's a team leader and environment and climate change specialist at UNDP Country Office, Ghana. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, colleagues, delegates, and colleagues from different countries who are here today. Like my other colleague mentioned, I equally do not have any PowerPoint presentation to make. I know we've seen several PowerPoint presentations over the period. I thought that I needed to have a very interactive discussions with the panel if it is allowed. But just to make a point that, as by two other colleagues have spoken already, the issues about Article 6 in general, of course, we know it's a new thing. Nobody has done it before. So, of course, we will have to do it learning by doing. But there are a number of fundamental issues that we need to take note as countries are interested in going to Article 6 projects or program in general. One had to do with the issues about political commitments. If there is no that level of political commitment within the host countries, it becomes a bit very difficult to even initiate any form of discussions, whether in terms of the authorization, the issuance, the recording, and all that. So it is important that you get that level of political commitment right even from the beginning before you would begin to have those kind of engagements. And for us as Ghana, one of the things that we learned was for us to be able to identify the champions within government itself, who are the technical experts that we think that we can rely on as one of the champions that could potentially be able to convince or have discussions with the political leaders in order for them to get their buy-in. And Daniel, as he just spoke, was one of the champions that we got, and we had to sit down to be able to understand what are the basic requirements for any country that is interested in entering into any Article 6 program. And once that level of hurdle was achieved, it became much easier for us to get the politicians to buy in, and there was a high-level commitment even from the office of the president, who is very, very interested in Ghana pioneering Article 6 programs in general. And that, of course, has demonstrated and has seen evidence that Ghana has, this week, authorized the first Article 6 program with the Swiss government in general. That showed that level of commitment from Ghana, just to mention that. But to also say that even though my other colleagues have mentioned, there are still quite a lot of capacity gaps that exist within the government itself, within the private sector, within the program developers. So it is important that some specific gap and needs assessment is done to identify the specific needs of the country, the specific needs of the sectors that are involved, the specific needs of the stakeholders that are involved. The NDCs involve several sectors, from the forestry, from the energy, from the transport, from the waste. So it is important that you try to understand the gaps and the capacity that exists among themselves. Then you do targeted capacity building. You know, there are several times that capacity buildings are organized for persons that do not even need it. So you need to identify the specific capacity gaps that relate to a specific sector, specific stakeholder, and do target capacity building programs. And that would be one of the things that I think the lessons that we have learned over the period in terms of implementing Article 6 program in Ghana. And of course, the issue about recording or corresponding adjustment in general is a very thorny issue, a very complicated issue. But in order to address such elements or such difficulties, it is important that there's a clarity in terms of the policy direction of the government. And Ghana developed the Article 6 policy framework. In that policy framework, it gives a clarity on the type of projects that Ghana is willing to give it out as Article 6 development projects. And there are conditional, of course, countries have conditional commitment they have in their indices. They have unconditional commitment under their indices. And to record those transactions, it is important to understand whether or not that particular program that is eligible for Article 6, does it form part of the conditional commitment of the indices? Is it the unconditional commitment of the indices? Or is it even outside the indices? And that will determine the kind of recordings that can be done in your national registries. And that's one of the things that there needs to be that clarity to avoid any form of confusion. If you don't have clarity on the type of programs that we have, whether it is part of the conditional, unconditional, or even outside the indices, it becomes very difficult and very complicated in terms of the recording. And that of the issue of integrity of the process, the issue of double counting, and following all the standard that is required by Article 6 could be jeopardized. So there was clarity that for Ghana, we can only commit to the conditional NDCs and interventions that are outside the NDCs. And that informed the basis of Ghana's recording or issues of how they apply the corresponding adjustment. And one of the things that I thought I needed to mention, but also to say that the recording process or the infrastructure that is put in place should not be that very complicated. We should rely on existing registries that already exist. And Ghana had registries from different sectors, from the forestry sector, from the energy sector, from the EPA, and from the transport sector. But we thought that we needed to harmonize all those reporting requirements or the infrastructure that existed and made it a bit very, very simple. So simplicity is very key in the recording, and that will give you clarity in terms of all the corresponding adjustment in that form. So I thought that I needed to mention that, make it very simple, rely on existing infrastructure, harmonize all the registries, and then it gives clarity with both the receiving country and the host nations. I thought I needed to mention this to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stephen. So for this session, this is going to be the last presentation. I'd like to close session 1 and 2 by thanking you for all the excellent presentations. Thank you very much. Now we are moving on to session 3, Way Forward for Expanding Article 6 Implementation. It's going to be a panel discussion. This session will be moderated by Ms. Sandra Greiner from Climate Focus. I'd like to welcome Sandra and the 8 panelists on the stage, please. Would you like this one?
you very much, Risa. Good afternoon, everyone. And welcome panelists. And let me perhaps start by just thanking the previous speakers for their great interventions and examples of Article 6 preparation that are already happening. So in this panel discussion, we would like to look a bit closer into Article 6 capacity building and what are the needs of countries, looking at the differences, the priorities for Article 6 implementation and capacity building, but also some of the challenges and then maybe opportunities to tackle these challenges through cooperation. And well, we have a fantastic panel to explore these questions with representatives from host countries, development partners, practitioners. But as you can see, we also have a very large panel. So we'll be going about it a bit like the high level at Nefertiti. So we have very short interventions, and we need to keep a timer. And the plan is that we will have 2 rounds of questions, which will be asked to each panelists. And if we are disciplined, we hope to also have a chance for some questions or comments from the audience before then turning to the final statements from panelists. So with that, let me now turn to our first panelist, Mr. Usman Falsar, the coordinator of the West African Alliance on Carbon Markets and Climate Finance. And let me kick off the discussion with a question. What do you see as the main capacity needs of countries in West Africa when it comes to Article 6?
Thank you, Sandra, for this question. And I really thank the previous speakers, and mainly those coming from our sub-region, I think from Ghana, who have already paved the way for me to address this question. Because with the West African Alliance on Carbon Markets and Climate Finance, we've managed to make a kind of gap assessment on all the 16 member countries. And what came out from this gap assessment in terms of capacity building is first we need to be able to do a very exhaustive stakeholder mapping in the country, and also try to build awareness with this stakeholder, this key stakeholder from public and private sector, and also develop a capacity building program for this key stakeholder in order to let them know about the paradigm shift that we have for the Article 6 that is really different from the CDM framework. The third thing is to assist the country in putting in place the appropriate policy and the regulatory framework that can enable the authorization of activity, the eligibility criteria, all these issues that have been already mentioned by our colleague from Ghana. And last but not least, support for institutional arrangement, the appropriate institution that we need to have in place in our respective countries. So in a nutshell, these are the main area of capacity building that we have identified for our West African countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Usman. We now have a chance to hear from a donor country representative, Ms. Rachel Pecker, who is with the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Change of Germany and working on international carbon markets, and as well as supporting the West African Alliance and other alliances. So let me ask you the question, so generally, what kind of capacity building does Germany provide in the space of Article 6?
Thank you, Sandra, and thank you for inviting me to this event. For Germany, the use of Article 6 starts with good capacity building, and this needs to be country-driven and looking at what the country actually needs, and they need to identify the needs and their requirements. In order to then, and we heard this before from our colleague from Ghana already, there needs to be clarity on what projects actually need to be implemented within their NDCs, and then what other projects might be eligible for Article 6 implementation. So there needs to be capacities also on the ground, looking at not only bringing in international consultants, but actually building the capacities on the ground so that countries are enabled to use Article 6 in the long run and sustainably. We also support capacity building in regional alliances, because we think there is a lot of value in actually in the exchange and in learning from one another, learning from similar experiences, but also, of course, looking at differences and very country-specific needs. But then it doesn't stop there, of course. Exchange also needs to include other stakeholders, such as the private sector. And with one of our other programs, and you'll hear from her later on, I think, with GGGI, we also support more exchange forums with the private sector as well as other stakeholders. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Let me now turn to Ms. Putipar from Thailand, who is working in the Ministry of National Resources and the Environment on carbon market and Article 6 issues. And I think Thailand actually already is advancing and putting in place institutional frameworks for Article 6. I'm wondering what are the remaining capacity building needs from the Thai perspective?
Thank you very much, Sandra. For Thailand, we think that we have 4 main areas that we need capacity building. The first one is about Article 6 strategy. I would like to echo the colleague from Ghana and also German colleague that mentioned about the technology or mitigation activity. We would like to identify the mitigation activity or technology that would be implemented under Article 6. And also we would like to know the contribution to sustainable development and also Thailand greenhouse gas emission reduction target. The second area is about reporting. As everybody knows that there are 3 main reports in Article 6, that is initial report, regular information, and annual information. There are quite a lot of issues. So in terms of technical issue as well, we really need capacity building. And also in initial report, we have to mention about the corresponding adjustment method. I think we would like to learn how to draw the trajectory, or which one should we use, or average or trajectory. That one we have to decide. So right now, I think this is an important issue as well. If we can get the capacity building, I think it will be great and it will be beneficial for our country. For the third area is about infrastructure. We have national registry. We developed our own crediting mechanisms in 2014, and we would like to make our national registry compatible with the tracking requirements under Article 6 and to facilitate reporting of its more transaction. Another area that we think will be beneficial if we can get the capacity building is about methodology. As I mentioned that we develop our own crediting mechanism, we have to develop methodology. So we would like to improve our standard and also make it compatible with the Article 6 methodology. I think these are four main areas. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And let me now turn to Mr. Manuel Garcia Rosell from the Peruvian Ministry of Environment, and also working in carbon markets and NDCs. And I think also Peru is actually one of the front runners with having already signed a bilateral agreement. So the question to you as well, what do you still see or where do you still could benefit from Article 6 capacity building?
Thank you, Sandra. In first place, I would like to mention the implementation of Article 6 demands intensive work and capacity building, taking into account the implementation of cooperative approaches has not undermined the achievement of NDC. So this is very important because it's very crucial in first place to take into account emission reductions that can become as ITMOs should represent emission reductions beyond our NDC. So the first question that we need to answer is, where is the potential emission reductions that we can offer to the carbon markets? So in this regard, we need to continue working with relevant authorities, because sectoral competent authorities has this responsibility also to identify the mitigation measures for the achievement of our NDC. So it's crucial that they has been involved. They will be involved in this process in order to identify these opportunities, but without undermining that achievement of our NDC. And in second place, as was mentioned before, it's important to increase the knowledge about how the Article 6 works and how this can contribute with the climate action. So we are focused in continue working on capacity building with sectoral authorities. Also, we consider it's important to improve the engagement of private sector, and of course, another relevant actor is the civil society, and especially indigenous people. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So our next panelist is Chandrasekhar Sinha from the World Bank. He's working on carbon markets, and I think quite famously on infrastructure and registries. But perhaps you could tell us a bit more broadly what are the capacity building priorities of the World Bank and Article 6.
Thanks, Sandra, and thanks for the invitation to speak here. In terms of the work of the World Bank and the framework with which we engage with different countries, we break up the challenge of the capacity building into specific blocks. What are the challenges in creating supply for mitigation outcomes? How do you create demand for mitigation outcomes? What is the infrastructure that you need in order to make the demand and supply come together in order to create a market? And finally, what are the enabling environments that is required in order to address this challenge? So let me start on the enabling environment first. You've heard from our colleague in Thailand that establishing the strategy for Article 6 is the starting point. You need to have clarity around what role Article 6 plays in your overall NDC and your long-term strategy. Then, based on that strategy, you need to start thinking of what is the policy environment that will allow you to implement the strategy. And linked to the policy environment would be a regulatory framework that you would need to establish at the national level. And finally, once you establish the regulatory framework, all along the way, you would have had to build the institutional capacity to make sure that those regulatory frameworks can be implemented, your policy can be enforced and taken forward. So now let me move back to the demand and supply and come back to my favorite topic of the infrastructure right at the end. In terms of the supply, the first thing that any country needs to do is to make sure what are the eligibility criteria of activities which fits in the longer term objective of the NDC of a country, and that is consistent with the development priority. The second, then, on the demand side, how do you ensure that these offtake agreements lead to actual financing of the activities that you want? So creation of the financial products. And finally, few seconds on the infrastructure. The starting point of the infrastructure is a robust registry system which is connected to the international market. And some of you may have heard of the work of the Multilateral Development Banks on the Climate Warehouse, which we're going to launch with the support of Chia Networks, which is here, and AITA in December in Singapore. But the idea is to have a digital infrastructure which is connected, which leads to credibility, trackability, and transparency in the market. So, Sandra, that's...
Thank you very much. So, our next panelist is Ms. Fenella Awan, who is head of carbon pricing global practice at the Global Green Growth Institute, GGGI. And Fenella, I think you are seeing quite a number of examples and working with different countries in Article 6. So from your perspective, where do you at the moment perhaps see the greatest challenges for countries to prepare for Article 6?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Sandra, and thank you for the host for inviting me to the panel. I think trying to, with the timer on, distill it down to 4 points, which is not terribly easy, but I think the biggest challenge is the blatantly obvious one, the increasing in complexity. You know, this isn't the CDM, you have to involve government. We've heard from Ghana very clearly, you have to involve multiple ministries, it's not just one ministry, you need to work out your strategy, you need to comply with something that is an amorphous block called environmental integrity, and everyone's trying to break that down and work out what that means. And you need to put in a lot of things in place. And I think one of the real simplest issues is everyone's come into this. It seems very fast, but actually we've all been working in this. I think most people on this panel for at least 3 years. People have come in at different points and have different terminology already. And now let's translate that to a second language if you're dealing in West Africa and needing to translate everything to French. So we might need to sort of pull back a little bit and get common terminology agreed. We've been speaking to Click quite a bit about this. Also, the challenge is translating a lot of these rules into the country context. We're based in the country, we sit with the ministries as their trusted advisors on green growth, and that's a big challenge that has to be dealt with. Working out how to benefit from all carbon markets. So we talk here about Article 6, that's government to government. What do we do with the voluntary markets? There's multiple markets to deal with. And finally, before my time's up, the money. How do we work out where the money goes to give the best support for the infrastructure in the host country, along with the best incentive to increase ambition? I'll leave it there.
Thank you, very interesting. So let me now turn to Ms. Ursula Flossmann-Kraus, who is a carbon procurement manager at the Click Foundation and actually a buyer of ITMOS. So the same question to you, and from your perspective, where do you still see the greatest need for capacity building in the countries you're engaging with?
Yeah, thanks very much, Sandra, for this important question. So the Click Foundation is the Swiss agency tasked with the procurement of ITMOs for the Swiss international pledges under their NDC. We work with partner countries that have signed the bilateral cooperation agreement for Article 6.2 with Switzerland. We provide results-based finance. And for those types of programs, of course, we see still capacity gaps in the partner countries, and they certainly vary as the partner countries vary. Nevertheless, I think there's an emerging consensus also in this room that the national frameworks really are of great importance, and we heard that also from the interventions from Ghana, Thailand, and Peru. And this is also in our experience, that those national frameworks that really allow countries to prioritize Article 6 activities that go beyond the unconditional pledges in their NDC, but that also allow them to coordinate stakeholders and define the important institutional steps and process steps for endorsement, for authorization, for reporting. These are really crucial, and here capacity development as well as peer learning can really play an instrumental role. However, we also still see capacity gaps in the private sector for identifying green business opportunities, for filing and developing and structuring Article 6 programs. And perhaps finally, we also see a need for building capacities and auditing capacities for validation and verification of Article 6 programs.
Thank you so much. And then our last speaker is Hugh Solway, Head of Markets at the Gold Standard. And we've slowly already transitioned to the private sector. So then explicitly the question to you, Hugh, where would you see perhaps capacity building needs for private sector stakeholders?
Yeah, thank you very much. And Gold Standard is an NGO, but we work with a lot of private sector project developers and other actors who are looking to use and invest in the carbon market. And I think we've heard a lot about the incredible importance of capacity building for countries, and there's clearly such a need in many places for that capacity building to unlock Article 6 and to make sure that we can have authorizations, we can have proper use of Article 6. But for it to be used and for the finance to flow, we need the private sector to understand how to develop Article 6 activities, how to seek authorizations, and how to manage these in the context of Article 6. And I think from our perspective and from what we've seen, there is real differences across private sector actors, and thinking more particularly about project developers. There are some who really understand how to use Article 6, how to think about the development of projects under Article 6, and many of those are the ones who are working with the Click Foundation or other early movers. But then we have a number of other project developers who may be looking to use Article 6 or more generally interested in understanding what this means for their project and the future of their units, even if they're not authorized under Article 6. And there are some real capacity building gaps there as well. There's some work which we've started to do as Gold Standard over the course of this year to try to build that capacity in the private sector and in particular amongst project developers. We have a piloting activity which we're doing with several project developers to really help them to understand what it means to design an activity that's aligned with Article 6 rules. So thinking about the baseline and how that differs, thinking about how to seek authorizations under Article 6, and trying to support the first connections with host countries. And from this to try to learn what this looks like from the perspective of a project developer so that others can learn from that. We also have a series of events and resources which we're trying to put out for project developers. And then importantly, and I think this builds on what we've heard earlier, trying to have bilateral conversations so we can answer and support with the specific questions that certain project developers and other actors have. Because I think we heard this well from Ghana before, it's really important to understand where you need to build capacity and where you need to focus. And sometimes that's in quite specific areas. And I think that's important for all of us to keep in mind.
Thank you very much, Hugh, and all panelists. So we come now to our second block of questions, which concerns international cooperation in capacity building. Also bearing in mind that tomorrow, as we heard, will be the launch of the implementation partnership by the Ministry of Environment Japan. And so I'd encourage all speakers to respond to these questions, but also perhaps to keep it a bit conversation style and to pick up on what other speakers said previously. And in addition, I would like to increase the challenge a bit to our panelists, noting that we are a little bit behind schedule. We now reduce the time available from 2 minutes to 1 minute. Should be no problem. And so let me again start with Usman. And on the question of international cooperation, well, I think the West African Alliance basically has in its DNA international cooperation. Could you share a bit of light how this is working and in which way international cooperation is relevant for countries?
Yeah, thank you, Sandra. I think for the West African Alliance on Carbon Markets and Climate Finance, our ultimate goal is to facilitate the development of carbon market in West Africa. And in that regard, we would like to work to bring additional financial resources in our sub-region so that it will help us facilitate the implementation of our NDCs. And in this context, international cooperation is key to overcome capacity building barrier in that sense that we decided to prioritize the learning by doing approach. By having this international cooperation, we can facilitate peer-to-peer learning, experience sharing, and to foster the process of readiness, and also to be able to have the appropriate infrastructures that have been developed by some countries and to be possible to implement it at a host country level, and also to go further for ITMO transaction. So in a nutshell, this is what we are working on a very frequent basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let me immediately pass to Rachel.
Thank you. So I'm not going to say what Usman just said. I'm going to focus on other things. So we heard that cooperation is really important, but it's also important to have a coordination to build synergy, but also avoid duplications, of course. And I thank Japan for the new initiative here as well, which is, I think, doing very important work in this regard. On the same time, having international cooperation, I think, is very important also to use the strengths of different stakeholders. And we have a lot of different stakeholders just here on the stage today, and each of them have their very specific own strengths as well to build capacities and help countries, but also the private sector, the youth, and others to build capacities. So working together in this regard, I think, is very important, and also kind of breaking silos, and I'm stealing this from another speech here, but breaking silos and working together in different sectors, different capacities. Thank you.
Yes, very good. Putipar.
Thank you. I think the platform that international partnership that the Ministry of Environment Japan that will launch, I think it will be useful, and we can share the experience among countries that participate in this partnership, and it will build capacity and also knowledge and readiness for our country to participate in the Article 6. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, just go ahead.
Is that the same question? Is that the same question, or?
Yes, I mean, I can specify the question a bit further. So for Peru, how would you see Peru to benefit from international cooperation?
Okay, thank you. I just want to add that the Article 6 implementation demands the fulfillment of new responsibilities for governments, and this is especially particular for host countries because we have not only the necessity to report the implementation of activity for Article 6, but also we need to implement regulation for this, and in this regard it is very important to take advantage of the experiences from other countries to reduce, to learn from that and to avoid mistakes and reduce in as possible as we can time and costs associated with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, please go.
Okay, it's a race almost, right? I think the objectives that were laid out in Maiko-san's presentation on the program to be launched tomorrow, the coordination, information platform, and ability to pilot and learn from that, I think are the three objectives of the program you're going to launch tomorrow, and I think those are precisely what is necessary. And As far as the World Bank is concerned and the other multilateral development banks are concerned, where we have a large program on capacity building, we coordinate through a working group of all the multilaterals which meets on a monthly basis. We similar have an arrangement under the Climate Market Club. Those of you interested could Google Climate Market Club and you'll see that we meet again on a monthly basis to agree on modalities and approaches for operationalizing Article 6, in which the implementing partners are a part as well, CLIC and GGGI, IGES. So the idea for us to at least coordinate amongst ourselves in a way that we provide systematic approaches and inputs which are consistent to our clients, I think is the critical way for us to move forward.
We don't need to say anything. You said it all. I mean, I think that probably shows it's avoiding the repetition, having the cooperation. As you say, Chandra, you know, we're part of the Climate Club. GGGI is part of the PMR, included in the meetings of the PMR. You come along and join things that we get involved in. So it is really important that the international organizations speak to each other and make sure that there isn't confusion. Sometimes it's important that the governments that you're giving the capacity building to are aware enough of what they need so they know what the request is. And, you know, there are some governments, Senegal, incredibly well organized, that's soldiering us all in line and telling us exactly who will be doing what, which is absolutely great. We carried out a survey to find out it's available on our website, who needs capacity building, are people interested, what happens, and out of that we created the Carbon Transaction Platform, which again is to try and bring parties together, which we hope to be launching next year. Stop there.
Excellent. And Ursula, from your perspective?
Great. My perspective on the role of international cooperation in 1 minute, I'd like to highlight 3 areas. Maybe first is really sharing of experiences, lessons learned, peer learning, so that Article 6 pioneers can exchange with newcomers on their experience, be it with national frameworks or with piloting their first activities. And I think really here international cooperation can play a crucial role. Second, TA, technical assistance, on again the national frameworks, but certainly also on the NDC update and review. So for actually having, being able to do that analysis and really specify what should be the Article 6 programs, also providing methodological tools. And then last, I'd say also developing a pipeline and doing the matchmaking between the programs, the program developers, the potential providers and the potential buyers. So you see a lot of capacity building initiatives, and I think it would be great if these also would come even a bit closer to the actual demand and to the buyers. And here I think TA or international cooperation is in a really good position because they're close to BAUs, and by doing that I think the necessary capacities can really be built both in the public and the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And last, Hugh.
Yeah, I think the point that's been made earlier about repetition is a really important one. And I mean, kind of linked to that, I think we're expecting that Article 6 will be implemented in slightly different ways to suit national circumstances. But we hope that there are certain areas where we do just see common models across countries, because that's incredibly important if you're a standard like us, which is working with projects in multiple countries, or if you're a project developer who is developing projects across multiple countries, that on some core issues like how the registry works and relates to other elements, or what implementation or bilateral agreements look like, some of these areas having some commonality across them just helps to build a scaled up international market which isn't fragmented and where you don't have sort of slightly different rules in different places which make things a little bit more inefficient. So international cooperation to understand what good models look like and to collectively raise the bar of how Article 6 is implemented will be incredibly important.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I think you all really lived up very well to the challenge. We've made up some time, and so we now have time, let's say, for 2 questions or comments that any of you in the audience may have. all been crystal clear? Okay. And it may also be to the previous session, right? So if you still had some Q&A related to what was presented earlier, also be welcome.
Thank you very much. My name is Dastan. I came from Kyrgyzstan. It's one of Central Asian countries. I have a question for previous presenter, if I may. When I saw in the presentation, you mentioned a couple of countries from different regions. I'm wondering, do you have any idea or plan to expand your activity in our region as well? Yes, maybe.
I think the question was to Mr. Müller from IGES.
Thank you. Hello? Okay. Thank you for the question. And thank you for the question. And as I mentioned, our program for the GCM joint crediting mechanism partner countries. So that's why we do mutual learning program using GCM as an example. But we are happy to discuss further collaboration if you're also interested in our capacity building program. So we are happy to discuss further. But the purpose of the program was the partner countries. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just hear that we now also have the opportunity to hear from a speaker from the first session from the UNFCCC Secretariat who is with us and has arrived, Luca. So just shortly, is there anyone wishing to make a final statement on the panel? Then I would give you that chance. If that's not the case, I invite you all to give a big hand of applause to our great panelists.
How much time do you have? 3 minutes. Okay. 3 minutes. Okay. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to those connecting remotely. My name is Carlos Ruiz Garvia. I'm the project manager of the Global Innovation Hub initiative under the UNFCCC. This is located at the Mitigation Division. It's a pleasure for me to be with you today and to see all familiar faces in connection to these capacity building activities under Article 6. I'm on behalf of Perumal. Perumal has been stuck on a different similar meeting, and he asked me to jump in to give few words about the capacity building program that has been launched last week by the Secretariat. A little bit of background, as you know, this is the COP of implementation, is the COP of looking and accelerating action. The synthesis report is clear. We need to expedite activities by countries. And of course, in that context, carbon markets are extremely important. So we really appreciate the support of the Japanese government to put together this facility to advance the capacity building programs, particularly supporting carbon market activities under 6.2 and 6.4. With that context, I also would like to mention that the Secretariat, as you know, have a constellation of regional collaboration centers to translate the complexities of the negotiations on activities at the Global South. We have 6 regional collaboration centers located in Asia, Middle East, in Africa. We have 2 centers and in Latin America and the Caribbean. At Glasgow, just to give the background of this feedback here, at Glasgow we received 2 mandates. One was on Article 6.2, where parties mandated the Secretariat to put together a capacity building program, including through their RCCs in consultation with parties. So we will be using them, the regional collaboration centers for this endeavor. And the main aim here is to support the development of institutional arrangements, including reporting, but we also include ensuring that the cooperative approaches support matters related to ambition. The centers will also help implementing these capacity building activities with an aim to assist the LDCs and the seats in meeting the participation requirements. That is in connection to 6.2, yeah, and in connection to 6.4, the capacity building program, including the RCCs in consultation with parties, aims to establish the necessary institutional arrangements to implement the requirements of the Article 6.4, but also develop the technical capacity to define and set baselines for application in the host parties. And finally, the last aim of this is to help and assist developing countries to apply the Article 6.4 mechanisms and to support for the transition. So this is part of the CMP mandate. With this mandate, the Secretariat has put much attention to enable implementation of the mandate. We have conducted a number of regional engagements with the regional collaboration centers. In May, we have a consultation with the national focal points on what are the priorities, what are the gaps in terms of capacity building needs to build this program. We also participated at the SBs, providing and interacting with parties, following up on these virtual dialogues, and finally also at the Climate Week. So in a nutshell, a lot of inputs has been collected, and them including a survey where we receive inputs and feedback from many parties and also actors that are relevant to these discussions. With this input and the feedback received, the Secretariat has launched last week a capacity building program. It's available to is at your disposal. This will set the key activities, the priority areas where the Secretariat will be implementing capacity building activities to implement this mandate. Just to conclude and to give you a flavor of these activities, in the next few months we will be focusing, for example, on the alignment of the Article 6 with the NDC implementation plans. We will undertaking of the decisions and assisting towards establishment of the institutional frameworks that need to be in place so that countries come up to speed to deliver the 6.2 and 6.4 action that is required. So please stay tuned. This is a very short time frame to provide you all of this rich information. We are very much looking to synergize with the other organizations that can help us to increase ambition on implementation of this capacity building work plan. But what we have is actually very powerful, very much needed to mobilize resources and build capacity in LDCs, in seats, but also in all countries that are participants to the mechanisms and to both 6.2 and 6.4. Stay tuned, and thank you very much. I pass the mic to the moderator, and please don't hesitate to contact us if you have any further question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for keeping it short to cramming all the information in one brief presentation. Thank you very much. All right, thank you very much for your active participation to all the speakers and panelists. To close this event, I would like to welcome Mr. Yoshihiro Mizutani, Director for International Cooperation for Transition to Decarbonization and Sustainable Infrastructure of the Ministry of the Environment of Japan, to deliver the final remarks.
Thank you very much for kind introduction. Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues. I'm Yoshiro Mizutani from Ministry of the Environment. I'm honored to make closing remarks at this event. First, I would like to express sincere gratitude to speakers and panelists for sharing with us your efforts and experiences on Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. I'm also glad that we have a lot of audience here today. As shared in this event, many countries wish to develop their capacity for the implementation of Article 6. And we also agree with the necessity of the development of swift and robust high-integrity carbon market. However, there are still challenges remained to implement the Article 6, such as how to minimize the gap between support providers and the recipients, and the detailed design for the implementation. In order to tackle those issues, as the Vice Minister and some of my colleagues has already mentioned, I have the honor to inform you again that Japan will launch the Paris Agreement Article 6 implementation partnership with more than 50 partner countries and international organizations and research institute at 1 o'clock tomorrow at Japan Pavilion to promote information sharing and mutual collaboration among a wide range of stakeholders. We hope more and more countries and organizations to join our partnership for realizing further global GHG emission reduction. If you are interested in the partnership, please contact my colleague Kotoe, she's over there, for further information just after the closing of this event. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Mizutani. And many thanks again to all the speakers and panelists. We certainly hope it was insightful for all of you, and we look forward to seeing and having many more opportunities to share our progress and good practices of Article 6 implementation soon. Thank you, and hope you had a great time. Thank you.
Hello. Hello.